Hello. It seems that 2020 and 21 are shaping up to be peak years of an integrated bracelet watch craze. Crazily, just a few years ago, you could pick up a Royal Oak at 30% under retail price on the grey market. Good luck with trying to do that now. It's even worse if you're thinking about trying to get a Nautilus, if you could even find one. So, given the demand, is it any wonder that brands at all price points are jumping onto the bandwagon? And here's a teaser of the watch we're looking at today. Can you guess what it is yet? Not exactly difficult, is it? Yes, it's the Tissot PRX, and the bracelet is probably the best and the worst feature at the same time for this watch. It looks fabulous, but unless you like to wear it loose, you may struggle with this one. More on that later, but first, let's get it out of the box. So Tissot do give a good box. It's rather attractive, and it's no nonsense, and it's a good place to keep your watch if you've got nowhere else to keep it. And a nice touch here is that there's a book in the base of the box that gives you the history of the brand itself. So without further ado, here's the white dial PRX. And the dial itself here is pretty cool, and I'll include some macro shots of it later on so you can see how good it looks close up. So the box also has a couple of cubby holes, one for the warranty card and the instruction manual. And there's also another little cubby hole that you can use to store any spare links that you have. There you go. So onto the watch itself. It's just under 40mm in diameter by my measurements and about 40.5mm across a diagonal and 44.5mm lug to lug. And the bracelet, has to be said, integrates really nicely into the watch. As you can see, the bracelet is really well brushed and it really makes the watch look a lot more expensive than it is. So that's about 510 Singapore dollar or 375 USD. And as you can see, there's a butterfly clasp, which is a bit easier to use than some luxury pieces that I've seen in the past, like the Nautilus. But there isn't a micro adjust, and that's an issue. For example, if you like to wear your watches tight in the wrist, then this might be a deal breaker for you because the watch will either be too loose for you or it'll be potentially very tight and uncomfortable when you're wearing it, especially on a hot and sweaty day. However, it doesn't change the fact that the bracelet is gorgeous, and you can see that there's a degree of flexibility across each link, which is very nice to see. And here's how it looks in my 6 3/4 inch wrist. While the dimensions, as we mentioned, are fairly reasonable, you can see that it wears quite a bit bigger on the wrist than you might expect. For me, I've struggled a little bit with the bracelet. Sometimes it's just right, and others it's just a little bit too tight, so I'll probably have to pop in another link at some stage in the future and see if that makes a difference. Though it will make the watch that little bit looser, and that might not suit everyone. So let's take a quick look at the dial. The PRX currently comes with a white, black, or blue dial, and the black and blue have a sunburst effect, but I ended up with the white dial, partly because the blue had sold out, it has to be said, but I kind of like it. But I kind of like the linen texture to the dial. It certainly makes the face interesting to look at, and I also think that the handset suits the watch well with this style, as do the baton markers, and the second hand here seems to generally hit the markers spot on, but I've heard that's not always the case. So let's have a look at the Loom now. Now you can see that there is Loom here, but it's definitely not to the standard you'd expect for a dive watch. However, this is a sports watch, so it's held to a slightly lower standard, I think, or at least in my opinion, and for that it works reasonably well. Having said that, you can see that the minute markers are fading pretty badly very quickly. So with that in mind, maybe just skip the minute markers and apply a few extra coats of Loom to the hands, and that might improve the watch overall. So let's transition from the dark to the light. And here we are outside, and you can see that the watch really catches the light, particularly the bracelet. And the dial might not have too much anti-reflective coating on it, but it's still fairly legible. However, when you're outside, if it's a hot and sweaty day, which it always is in Singapore, the bracelet's going to get a little bit more uncomfortable to wear if you've got it fairly tight in the first place. So should you consider this watch, and should you get the quartz, or should you hold on and try to get the automatic, which will be out in the near future, but it'll be about double the price? Well, for 375 US bucks, you're getting a lot of watch for your money, and it does look a lot more expensive than it actually is. So you could argue that the automatic versions are a bit closer to the money that the looks demand. However, the watch will be just that little bit thicker and heavier, which might put some people off. Now, for me, I was looking for a watch that looks pretty good and that I know I can just grab and go without having to worry about setting it. So for that reason alone, the quartz works really well. I'm also a really big fan of the white dial, especially the texture that you can see here. And it has to be said that the automatics will have different dials, so they're going to look a bit different to the quartz models as well. So in summary, I think it's a really decent watch for the money, and it certainly looks like it costs a hell of a lot more than it does. However, the bracelet isn't as comfortable as I'd like. And that's because I tend to like to wear my watches fairly tight. So if you prefer to wear a watch that way, be warned you might have to keep it looser than normal to make it work, and that for some people might well be a deal breaker. The one thing to note is that the integrated bracelet does have quick releases on it, suggesting that Tissot at some point in the future will start selling possibly rubber, leather straps, etc. So it might not be an entirely lost cause if you like your watch to be fairly tight on your wrist. So that's it. Hope you liked the video. If you did, please like and subscribe, and feel free to leave a comment below too. Thanks very much for watching.